we have a big topic today, and I want to make sure that I quickly transition our food for thought straight to Paula. And for, I think it's Anna. Anna's our new participant. For Anna, Paula is our oncology nutritionist that is really giving us some excellent information on all things food. So you're in for a real treat. We're not going to have her for forever, but we do have her for right now. So we're going to completely dial in and try to be sponges to learn everything Paula knows in a short period of time. Today's topic is carbohydrates, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if carbohydrates are something that you are really confused about and you're really curious, just so you know, it is such a large topic. Paula and I decided to break it apart into 2 sessions. So today we're going to get the foundational piece on carbohydrates in general, and then the next class we're going to go into that ever popular carbohydrates and sugar and where that fits into our world. So don't panic. Like I said before, our classes, our sessions follow a similar format each time we're together, which is we do this quick intro, I pass the baton to Paula, and at the end, when Paula's finished, we field questions. Again, it's a short period of time that we're together. So if by some reason we have a lot of questions today, I am going to ferociously write them down. And then you are going to not only get the playback link from today, you will get all of the PDFs that we're sharing. In addition to that, we will do some Q&A in a written form. So just to make sure that you get what you need. So nothing's urgent. We will make sure. And then you also have direct access to me, which I will share how to get in touch with me after the session if you do have more information. Anna just wanted to share that she is trying to help her son heal Hodgkin's lymphoma. He's also on mistletoe and trying to heal with diet and lifestyle changes. And I love to hear that, because we know that the body's super smart and would love to do just that. So without further hesitation, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Paula. Feel free to continue to throw those questions up in the chat. We may not address them until the end, but please know that I have written them down. Sound like a deal? All righty. Paula, don't keep us waiting.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome again. So happy to be with you today. Happy for the sunshine here in Maryland, where I am. We love to hear where you guys are tuning in from. So please keep putting that in the chat and how you came to find us. We love hearing the stories and connecting with you all. So today, as Stacy mentioned, we're going to tackle carbs, and we've got the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today, we're going to tackle the first 2. So, so far in our journey together, we've explored the topic of why food matters and how food is information for our cells, information that can change the way our cells function and how we feel. Last time we were together, we talked about the importance of eating high quality whole foods, organic fruits and vegetables, pasture-raised, grass-fed animals, and wild fish from reputable sources. How are you guys doing on putting those into action in your life? If any of you are returning from previous sessions, put it in the chat for us. Like if you've had any wins or challenges with trying to put any of this information into use, we'd love to hear how it's going for you. I think it's helpful to others, it's helpful to us. So you can feel free to enter that as you listen to me as well. So today we're talking about carbohydrates, and that word alone can evoke some strong reactions in people. Some people fear carbs, other people are addicted to them and fear giving them up. So low carb diets have been all the rage in the world lately, and there's a lot to understand about carbs to really decipher the healthy from the unhealthy to the toxic, and even more so when cancer is involved. So just like any good parent, I'm going to lead with what I want you to do, which is today, we're going to focus on the good part of carbs. And next session, we'll dive more into sugar, which is the ugly side of carbs. So first, let's get a little bit of science out of the way. There are 2 classes of carbohydrates, simple carbs and complex carbs. Simple carbs are basically simple sugars. These are molecules like fructose found in fruit, lactose in milk, and sucrose in cane sugar, glucose in honey. Monosaccharides like fructose and glucose are ready to be used by the body immediately. Intake of simple carbs should be limited. Simple carbs include those processed foods, or AKA bad carbs because they're quickly digested. They spike our blood sugar and they're lacking in any real nutrients. Complex carbs are also made of sugar molecules. They're just strung together in a longer, more complex sequence, and they require additional steps to be broken down. Those extra steps required to break down complex carbs, that's a good thing. Complex carbs are divided further into two categories, but all you really need to know are the foods that make up these two categories. The first group, oligosaccharides, contain beans, peas, bran, and whole grains. The enzymes in our bodies can't break these plant cell structures down, but the microbes in our gut can, and we'll circle back to that in a minute. The other group is polysaccharides, the starches and fibers found in plants like cereal grains, potatoes, legumes, fruit skins, and a lot of other vegetables. As I mentioned, complex carbs have to be broken down into individual sugar molecules in order to be used as fuel for our own bodies. But it's this very fact that gives them the title of good carbs, because digestion of complex carbs occurs much more slowly, which means sugars are released into our bloodstream more slowly. That's a good thing. And another very important part about complex carbs is that they're full of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and fiber that keep our cells healthy and happy. So we just learned a little bit about simple and complex carbs. Now we're going to tackle how the choice of carbs, simple or complex, impacts our bodies by going over the glycemic index, fiber, and blood sugar. To give you an idea of how quickly foods are metabolized sugars, a system called the glycemic index was created. This index ranks food on a scale of 1 to 100 in terms of how quickly it raises our blood sugar compared to pure sugar. White table sugar has the highest ranking at 100 for frame of reference. So, Stacey, you might want to mute yourself. I'm not sure there's some feedback.
I am muted. So for our participants, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and put your microphone on mute. That's on the left-hand side of your screen, and all you have to do is click on it, and then it won't pick up that background noise. Thank you.
Yeah, that's greatly helpful for the people that are listening back on recording as well. Thanks everyone for muting. So here we've got a picture of some breakfast cereals and some high glycemic foods. And they're processed foods here, which you'd expect to be high glycemic: white rice, cereal, pasta, breakfast items. And I hope you can all answer this question by now. Why are high glycemic foods like this in this section? It's because the processing of those foods strips away the nutrients and fiber, leaving behind only the parts that quickly turn to sugar. Now, low glycemic foods tend to be whole foods like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Just know that the glycemic index doesn't tell the whole story. There's something called the glycemic load, and you see the glycemic load on the far right here and the glycemic index in the center. Now, the glycemic load takes into account the serving size of the food, how much you actually would likely eat in a serving, as well as the fiber and protein content of the food. So let's take a look here at, for example, at watermelon. It has a glycemic index rating of 72. That's pretty high. I've seen other charts listed as high as 80 in terms of glycemic index. But the glycemic load, if you look across, is only 4. And that's because the water content of watermelon is so high that for the serving size you'd eat, 120 grams is about a cup, that the sugar content in that serving is fairly minimal, and the impact on your blood sugar is fairly minimal. So the thing about glycemic index and glycemic load is it can really vary depending on how much of the food we're eating and what other foods we're eating with it. We rarely eat foods in isolation, although that does happen. But when we combine foods, that definitely can change the glycemic load and blood sugars that we experience. So let's look here for another example at white rice. That's in the center here of your screen. White rice average glycemic index of 89. Now that's pretty darn close to pure sugar. If you look across at the glycemic load, it's only 43, still pretty high, but much lower. And that's for about 3/4 of a cup. Say you were making cream of rice, having a GI upset time and wanting to make something soothing for yourself. So I'm not advocating using white rice in your diet, but just say that that's what we're doing here for this example. So if you used a full fat coconut milk, say, to make that rice pudding, or rice porridge. I didn't mean to say pudding. If you're making that rice porridge with white rice and you use a full fat coconut milk, you're really going to change the glycemic load just by pairing it with that fat. So that would change the glycemic load and lower it quite a bit. You can also then use brown rice, for example. When you compare brown rice and white rice, you can see here, brown rice is significantly lower on the glycemic index because, again, it has the fiber attached to it, and it therefore digests a lot more slowly and gives you some other good things. So if you're making a rice porridge for yourself, please use some nice fats with it. Add some good spices like cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, things that can be anti-cancer, and pairing it with healthy fats and proteins will help slow the metabolism and release of the sugars. But ultimately, sugar is sugar, and we want to avoid spikes in sugar, which can happen when we eat high glycemic foods, because ultimately, cancer doesn't care where the sugar comes from, whether it's ice cream or honey. It will use the glucose for its benefit, regardless of the source. So the important part about glycemic index is it's just a place to give you a frame of reference for if you're unsure if a food is really high in sugars and going to quickly turn to sugar. It's a good place to get an idea of that, but don't get too tangled up to these with these numbers. Remember, this is a little bit of a review from session 1. There's a metabolic price to be paid for digesting any food. For turning it into fuel for our cells. Turning food into energy that our cells can use costs us nutrients, B vitamins, chromium, manganese, magnesium, potassium, to name a few. So if your food doesn't contain a lot of healthy nutrients, then you're making a withdrawal from your nutrient stores by eating it, which is what happens when you eat processed foods. So eating processed foods regularly depletes nutrient stores and raises blood sugars, leading to a cascade of negative consequences. Now, before we take a deeper dive into blood sugar, I want to circle back to complex carbs here for just a moment. And we're going to talk a little bit about fiber. Fiber is so important, it deserves a little time in the spotlight. And fiber comes from those complex carbs, and it comes in 2 forms, soluble and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber dissolves in hot water and is found in legumes, oats, barley, some fruits, and some vegetables. Soluble fiber is the type of prebiotic fiber, not to be confused with the probiotic. The prebiotic that's fermented in our large intestines by good microbes, and they produce something called short-chain fatty acids. And those short-chain fatty acids are essential food to keep the cells of our large intestine alive and healthy. That's their fuel. Insoluble fiber cannot be dissolved in hot water, nor can it be broken down by the enzymes in our digestive system. And examples of food rich in insoluble fiber include whole grains, wheat, corn bran, nuts, seeds, some vegetables, and some fruits. Generally, vegetables and most grain products contain more insoluble fibers than soluble fibers. And insoluble fiber speeds up transit time of food through our GI tract and creates that good feeling of fullness after we eat. And it also creates bulk in our stools, which we need. Resistant starch is another type of fiber. It resists digestion, just like the name implies, simply due to the way that plant cells are tightly packed in these foods. It's found in green bananas, some legumes, raw potatoes, and it can also be found in some cooked foods like rice, pasta, and potatoes, and certain types of corn. So when these foods, like rice, pasta, potatoes, have been cooked and then cooled, the cooling process creates the resistant starch, and that's where it forms. Now, these foods in and of themselves typically tend not to be very nutrient dense. White potatoes, white rice, white pasta, that's really not, the foods we're going for. But if you happen to be eating it, you might as well take advantage of this kind of hack and the resistant starch that forms by cooking it, cooling it, and then reheating it to your liking. So the resistant starch bypasses digestion and provides that good fuel for our colon cells, those short chain fatty acids. Taking a look at fiber recommendations. So for our gentlemen, it's 38 grams per day if you're 50 or younger. And for the ladies, it's 25 grams per day if you're 50 and younger. And these recommendations go down as we age, which makes no sense to me. I'm not sure why that is or who came up with that idea, but if you ask me, these recommendations are pretty low if you're looking toward optimal health. I think striving toward a fiber intake of more along the lines of 50 grams per day is more aligned with health. And our ancestors ate up to 50 to 100 grams per day. And many well-known physicians like Mark Hyman emphasize the huge shift in the number and the variety of plants we eat compared to our ancestors, and the parallel increase in disease from heart disease to diabetes and, cancer. So why are we spending so much time talking about fiber? Why is fiber even important? In addition to slowing the release of blood sugars in our body and aiding in bowel movements, I want to highlight some other important things about fiber. Soluble fiber helps to bind fats in our blood, like fatty acids from food, bile, and cholesterol. And guess what? Fats that are bound to fiber can't be absorbed. They're excreted in our stool. So more fiber in our diet means less LDL or bad cholesterol in our blood. And that sounds pretty good, right? In order to achieve that effect, you need to eat 6 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables, or 2 to 3 servings of legumes and grains. Our gut bacteria thrive on what we feed them. Our microbiome is a huge and fascinating topic that perhaps we'll tackle in another session, another day. But I'm going to hit you with some big facts. About 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. And these microbes outnumber our own human cells by 10-fold. These microbes are really important. They aren't just casual accessories to our bodies. And we're learning more and more each day, they actually might be driving more cellular functions than our own cells. So anyway, how this relates to fiber is, remember the short chain fatty acids I mentioned earlier that the microbes make when they're feasting on fiber? Well, guess what they do? They stimulate the production of immune cells, macrophages, T helper, lymphocytes, neutrophils, and antibodies, all important parts of our immune cell army. If a doctor could give you a pill that could do all that, it'd be a pretty popular pill. So in addition to slowing down the release of sugars into our blood, fiber can help lower our cholesterol and stimulate our immune system. And we're not done yet with fiber. Fiber also aids detoxification. Our beneficial microbes search for and grab onto harmful waste and toxins like little Pac-Men in a video game, including carcinogens that might otherwise be free to interact with our cells and cause damage. Fiber not only grabs toxins and sweeps them out, it speeds up transit time, meaning the time our food and waste spends in our GI tract. Why does that matter? Well, because if your stool hangs around in your colon too long, guess what happens? The toxins that are meant for excretion get reabsorbed right back in our bodies. You know what else gets reabsorbed? Hormones. Hormones get reabsorbed that are sitting, waiting to be expelled. And even though the body decided they weren't needed anymore, when they sit there too long, they'll get reabsorbed and hormone imbalance can result. And as we know, too much hormone and hormone imbalance can definitely fuel cancer. So lastly, how fiber and cancer prevention go together. Those short chain fatty acids our gut bacteria make from fiber have been shown to also arrest cancer cell growth, encourage cancer cell death or apoptosis, and they also encourage cell differentiation in tumor cell studies. Cell differentiation is an important process that healthy cells do really well, but cancer cells don't. Short chain fatty acids make it difficult for those abnormal cells to take hold, slowing the proliferation of cancers like colon cancer. If you've ever had a colonoscopy, it wouldn't surprise me if the doctor afterwards suggested that you eat more fiber, because that makes our colon really healthy and happy. So if you want a healthy gut and a healthy immune system, feed the good bugs. And how do you do that? You feed them whole, high-quality foods like complex carbs. Processed foods like simple carbs feed the bad bugs. With too much of the wrong foods, simple carbs, the bad bugs can overrun the good, which then creates a cascade of inflammatory compounds that contribute to a cancer-friendly environment. And we don't want that. So while we've just chased this carb discussion down a bit of a fiber rabbit hole, I hope you learned that all this detailed information always comes back to the same place: eating whole foods. Complex carbs are whole foods, and we just learned how eating them has so many benefits that ripple throughout the body. That's the magic of eating whole foods. We get stronger immune systems, better detoxification, healthy blood levels of lipids, a happy gut microbiome, and cancer prevention just from eating fiber. So does it surprise or even shock you to learn that there are no required carbohydrates in the diet? Well, it did me. When I learned this in grad school, I was kind of surprised. It's a pretty well kept secret. That's right. There's no actual physiological requirement that our body has for carbohydrates. There are essential amino acids, and those are the ones we have to get from our diet because our body can't make them. There are essential fatty acids, same thing, our body can't make those, so we have to get those from our diet. But there are no essential carbohydrates. And while it's true that we do have some organs like our brain that require glucose 24/7, our body can make its own glucose from proteins and fats. There's no actual physiological need to consume foods that yield glucose. Given the revelation of the lack of the body's requirements for carbohydrates, let's reflect a little bit on the current American guidelines for macronutrients. The government currently recommends the following intake. Carbs be 45 to 60% of your intake on a daily basis. Fats would be 20 to 35, and proteins 10 to 35%. In comparing this to what our ancestors, again, these are approximations based on research from pre-industrialized food kind of ancestors, so at least 150 or more years ago, they ate far less carbs. And when they did eat carbs, they were whole foods like fruits, vegetables, and later grains. If our ancestors wanted a sweet treat, they had to make it from scratch, from whole foods. They couldn't just go to the 7-Eleven or the drive-through for a donut. I'm sure you've heard the old stories of what a treat it used to be to get an orange in your Christmas stocking back in the day. Things sure have changed, because I know my kids would personally probably throw that orange at me if I gave them an orange in their Christmas stocking. So I don't know if you can see it, or it's kind of becoming clear through our talks together, but if you can see the connection between the shift in our diets from before food was industrialized and made in factories, and how it's shifting so much what we eat and the kinds of foods we eat, and how much we've shifted in the last several hundred years of eating a lot more carbohydrates. And we've also had a lot more disease coming up in our world. So let's take a little recap before we move on to blood sugar. Simple carbs, except for fruit, are the ones that don't usually offer any nutrients, just calories, and they raise our blood sugar quite a bit. They cost us metabolic currency, or nutrients, to process. They drain our bodies of health and our healthy cells of what they need to do their jobs, which is to fight cancer and other disease. Complex carbs are important sources of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, phytonutrients, antioxidants, and of course, fiber, which they can't be found in proteins and fats, even the healthy ones. So I'm not advocating that you avoid all carbs. I'm urging you to focus on the right carbs, low glycemic, whole plant foods. In session 1 and 2, we talked a lot about food as information. So hopefully you're familiar with those terms and understand them well, or you can go back and watch those episodes. In the words of Dr. Mark Hyman, you want to eat slow carbs. Slow carbs are complex carbs that take a long time to digest. They're naturally low in sugars and high in fiber, like asparagus, broccoli, cabbage, bok choy, kale. We know cancer doesn't care whether the sugar comes from a pineapple, pizza, or a cupcake. We have to choose our carbs wisely and be focused on those low glycemic carbs, which provide the most nutrients possible, the most bang for our grocery buck. Remember, cancer is a situation where the nutrients that should be used by our healthy cells are being diverted and used by cancer cells. So it's important to be bathing our healthy cells with as many vital nutrients as possible by consuming that low glycemic plant-rich diet. We only have so many occasions to eat through the day, and it's important for healing to make them count. Now we're going to move on to blood sugar. So most people in the cancering journey have become aware of their blood sugar levels and how they're measured and how important they are for health. So I think it's important to have that general understanding that cancer cells do use carbs we ingest, and how eating simple carbs creates way too cozy of an environment for cancer to grow. By now, you're probably all familiar with these blood sugar markers. I thought I'd just go over them really quickly. You've got your fasting glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, and your insulin. And both the fasting glucose is just a snapshot of your blood sugar at that moment that the phlebotomist draws your blood. The hemoglobin A1C is about a 3-month average of your blood sugar levels. That's about how long a red blood cell lives, and it looks at how covered in sugars or caramelized those red blood cells are. And the insulin also, like fasting glucose, is a snapshot in time of how much insulin is in your blood circulating after you've been fasting for a while. Now, insulin plays a big role in the cancer picture. Blood sugar and subsequent insulin spikes can give cancer a chance to take hold and thrive, and even get in the way of the body's response to cancer treatments. Our immune systems are better able to protect healthy cells and kill cancer cells when blood sugars are normal and stable. When we eat a carbohydrate, it's digested and broken down into glucose and any other components like fats or proteins. If it's a simple carb, like a saltine cracker, our bodies will quickly convert that to glucose, and it'll be released into the bloodstream also quickly. The presence of sugar in the bloodstream is what stimulates the pancreas to release the insulin. And recall that insulin hormone acts to take the glucose out of our blood and put it into the cell, where then the cell can use it for energy. When blood levels are chronically elevated, the insulin receptors, I'm sorry, let me just check here. I think I skipped over a slide here. When blood levels are chronically elevated, the insulin receptors in our cells become numb, like the story of the boy who cried wolf. And when he cries wolf too many times, our cells stop opening the door when insulin comes knocking, because insulin is constantly knocking. And that's called insulin resistance. That means that the sugars are trapped in our bloodstream where they can't get out and get into our cells for energy, because insulin's their only ticket in, and the cells become numb to the insulin. So the situation becomes even a little trickier when cancer is present. You see, cancer cells are loaded with insulin receptors. In fact, cancer cells have 10 times the number of insulin receptors versus a normal cell, and gobble up glucose at a rate that's almost 50 times faster than healthy cells. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on the saying that sugar feeds cancer, because it is true that cancer uses the sugar that we eat and has a more voracious appetite for glucose than our healthy cells. But the insulin that's released to get the glucose out of the blood also acts as a cancer fuel and can stimulate a cascade of inflammatory compounds, which helps cancer to thrive. So we want to make sure that we keep our blood sugars level. Here are some symptoms associated with hypo and hyperglycemia. I'll switch to the hyper in a minute. And both are blood sugar extremes. If you're experiencing any of these symptoms between meals, or if your blood sugar markers are out of range, it's important to reduce the number of carbs you're eating and focus on eating only complex carbs that are from whole food sources. If you're like most people eating a standard American diet, eating a lot of simple carbs, the first step would be to begin eliminating those simple carbs and swapping them out for complex carbs, especially at breakfast. If you ignite that sweet tooth in the morning, it'll chase you all day long. The next step toward gaining better blood sugar control will be to reduce or eliminate grains and rely on vegetables for your carb intake. A more advanced step would be to limit overall carb consumption, even healthy carbs, which is what happens in a ketogenic diet. Now, a ketogenic diet can be a great tool and a very powerful one, but it's not right for everyone and should definitely be done under careful medical supervision when cancer is involved. In summary, all cells need some level of glucose to survive. It's so essential. As I mentioned previously, the body has its own way of producing glucose, even if we don't eat it. So it's impossible to eliminate all sugars in the hopes of starving cancer cells, because cancer cells are very cunning and resourceful. And while glucose is their preferred fuel, they can turn almost anything we eat into fuel if pushed to do so. And in trying to starve cancer cells, it results in starving our healthy cells of vital nutrients and antioxidants, phytochemicals, and fiber, and so many of the compounds that our immune systems need to be able to overpower the cancer. So please don't try to starve yourself please don't try to starve your cancer by starving yourself of all carbs without an experienced ketogenic diet expert and your doctor to help you make those important decisions. Spend your carb allotment thoughtfully and wisely, because all carbs turn to glucose, and you want to choose the ones that are low glycemic and the ones that have the highest nutrient and fiber content. For most people, whole foods like broccoli, asparagus, arugula, blueberries, mushrooms, cabbage, all the leafy greens, they can be eaten freely. Eat the rainbow. Eat as many colorful plants as you can each day and get the widest variety of nutrients and compounds to fuel your healthy cells and empower your immune system. We all have to eat, so keep your mind on inviting and supporting health, and maybe even ask yourself those questions as you plan your meals. I'm going to leave you with a quote by Dr. Mark Hyman. what you find at the end of your fork is way more powerful than anything you'll find at the bottom of a pill bottle. And a little teaser as to next time, a sneak peek into our episode on sugar, because Valentine's Day is around the corner. And before our next episode, I thought I'd give you some better chocolate choices. These are no glycemic chocolates, meaning they are sweetened, but not with anything that produces a blood sugar response. So there's stevia, there's monk fruit. I can't remember if the other one is xylitol, but they are having non-glycemic sweeteners in there, and might be some good alternatives to chocolate for Valentine's Day. Lastly, we are ready for questions. All finished. We made it.
Whew. My goodness, Paula. The carb whammy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just take a couple moments and give you a non-nutritionist, oncology nutritionist breakdown. And I share that because, again, Paula is a wealth of information. And then there is the rest of us, right? And so for some of us, we have not chosen to be on this journey, whatever capacity. And I don't want to assume that everybody is a nutrition geek like Paula and myself. So here's the thing. The overarching message that my takeaway from Paula's talk is that we are trying every 2 weeks to give you the tips, tools, and strategies to create your own non-cancer friendly environment. Again, you did not, I'm assuming those of us who are on the call and on the webinar did not raise their hand to be in this conversation necessarily by choice, right? We're trying to do better for whatever reason. So in just a moment, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to go back to the 3-day food journal, and I'm just going to show you some very quick hacks. The idea is that what Paula was talking about was just incorporating more fiber into the diet. It was about keeping steady state blood sugar. We don't want those highs and those lows, and creating a cancer-friendly environment. And of course, that we want to, she touched on the glycemic index and the glycemic load. And boy, that is a tremendously heady topic. So here's the thing. When the webinar is over, you are going to get a bunch of PDFs from Paula. She's so kind to share with us, including a link. My recommendation for you all is to take one thing to work on and maybe not go down each of these different areas, because it becomes very, very overwhelming. Wendy, I'm looking at your comment here, and I'm recording. There's been a couple people that haven't received the handouts, and you have my word that I will get after that. So as Paula mentioned, we are opening up the conversation just to put our questions in there. We'll get to a couple, but I just want to show you a quick example on what this could look like very simply. Just share my screen here with you. And let's see if we can find our food tracker. Hopefully you'll all be able to see this. So what I heard Paula talking about was, and for those of you who are brand new, what we're doing is we're just recording 3 days of every BLT, bite, lick, and taste, that we engage in. It's no judgment, it's for you. And what I'm trying to do is take that 3-day food journal and see if we can clean it up a little bit as Paula goes through her sessions. So I just want you to go down to that second line item. For breakfast, we were having blueberries, we were having some oatmeal, and we were having some milk with that to go along with it. And what we did was we cleaned it up a little bit. We made, from last session, we made those blueberries, we bought them organic. We also purchased organic gluten-free oatmeal. We chose a nut milk instead of a dairy version of a milk. All I did was add a low glycemic fruit just to get a little more fiber in there, get a little more whole foods. So if you travel across that line item all the way to the right, you can see I did the same thing with my snack for the day and my lunch for the day and my dinner. I very, very simply, my goal was twofold: to get more fiber and to add in more fruits and vegetables. In addition to that, for my lady who's calling in from Malaysia, she said she just can't live without rice. I hear ya, right? And so Paula's hack there would be, if you're choosing a white rice, right, you could upgrade your rice choice to a whole grain version of something, a quinoa or something like that. But if you love that white rice, go ahead and cook it, cool it, and then reheat it to be able to slow this process down. Again, just looking for ways that we're not overhauling our nutrition and that we can find ways to layer in instead of the word, which I hate, is deprivation. We're looking to clean up. And trust me when I tell you, the palate can be retrained. So if you're somebody who's really interested in the next topic in regard to carbs and sugar, just a reminder, between Paula and I, we have lots of different ways to change the palates where you start to crave different kinds of healthier versions. So as I mentioned, this is just a quick example of how to do just a little bit better, if you will. I'm going to switch over and stop share, okay? And what I would like to do is open up the chat for questions. Answered Ginny's from Malaysia. We talked about the rice a little bit. Ginny also asked if there's a trend of eating diet according to your DNA. Does it really work? And just to make sure Paula's protected here, if there's a question that she needs to give them a little bit more thought to before she responds, she will share that with us and she will pick up the answer in our summary. Paula, do you want to answer that big topic of eating diet according to your DNA?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that come to mind when Jenny asks this, and she can let me know if I'm hitting on what she's asking there. But one thing is there's like blood type diet where there's a book called Eat for Your Blood Type that tailors what type of foods you should really focus on eating and how they work well with your blood type. So that I do find is background information to be helpful. I do like that book. If you're talking about genetically really modifying and tailoring your diet to your DNA, I think that's super helpful if that's accessible to you. There are people, for example, that don't digest fats very well and don't do well, therefore, on a high fat diet. Those things are important to know. So there are a lot of things about our specific genetic hiccups, if you will, that do help us to eat healthier and better for ourselves and to understand our own bodies the best, because ultimately that's the journey of life, right? Is to understand ourselves better and what our needs are and to help ourselves be as healthy as we can be. So I think if you have access to your genetic information, I would absolutely use that.
Sorry about that. Kate, to answer your question, you can put it in either place. The chat or the Q&A is just fine. I will get to all. So the next question, again, Ginny asks, it's unusual, which is not really unusual. I can't wait to hear Paula's response. Strange that too high of fiber causes me to be bloated. For example, quinoa, the cause of slow digestion.
So there could be a lot of things going on there, Jenny. There could be gut dysbiosis happening where your microbes, your bad and your good bugs are kind of off in their balance. And so things might be moving too slowly. It might be that the bad bugs are overpowering the good bugs. And because our food doesn't ferment in our gut, it's the microbes in our food that are fermenting and feasting on that fiber. So maybe you want to play with your portions of your grains. Again, grains should be eaten in moderation if they're being eaten at all. And that's really a personal choice that you have to make with your healthcare team. But that could be a variety of different things going on there with the bloating. And so you might want to try pulling back on the volume that you're eating, and also maybe adding some light movement, like a walk after you eat grains, to see if that helps move things along.
Yeah, can I take a turn at it too, Paula?
Sure.
Sometimes with our higher fiber food, especially if we have not been enjoying those for a period of time, sometimes digestion takes almost like a muscle, like a little bit of practice to catch up to, to be able to break that food down. And sometimes you'll see that with that bloating and the gassiness and whatnot. So especially when it comes to those high fiber vegetables, I find like cauliflower, broccoli, we'll hear that a lot. So everything Paula said, and then also if you are somebody who is newer to a higher fiber diet, just remember it may take a little bit of time to get in there and let the body adjust. Agree? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally agree. You can definitely change your microbes are going to change based on what you're eating. So it does sometimes take a little while for them to get in sync with your diet. And for some people, grains really aren't easily digestible. You might need digestive support, like a digestive enzyme. There could be a lot of other things going on there. But if grains aren't your happy food, then pull back on them and eat different vegetables that do make your GI system feel really good and easily digested, because we don't want to tax our bodies. If there's a bloating and a heaviness and difficulty processing it, pull back on the volume, see if that helps, give your body a little time to adjust. But if it's not helping and grains really seem to be kind of fighting with your system, then that might be time to listen to your body and just leave those aside for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Kate asks, I'm trying to lower my blood sugar. I've been pre-diabetic for over 30 years. How would you recommend I get the needed fiber? I've already noticed that my bowels have changed after being on keto for 1 week. I was plant-based before and I was very regular.
So the question is about getting better blood sugar control.
How do you get the needed fiber?
Okay, so that should be coming from your plants and your vegetables. So the best most vegetables are pretty low glycemic. Even some of the starchy vegetables, when they're eaten with paired with fats and proteins, they're perfectly safe for most people to eat. You get a lot of good out of them. So starchy vegetables would be like your carrots or peas. Corn doesn't. I don't think corn has a great lot of nutrients to offer. So that's not so much of a starchy vegetable I would focus on, but carrots are great. And if you pair them with something healthy, like a healthy fat and a protein, it also slows down that digestion. But there should be a plethora of, dark leafy greens, asparagus, cabbage. There are so many, you walk through the produce aisle, any vegetable you see will help add fiber and help create that bulk and keep your stools regular. Now, ketogenic diets are a thing unto themselves. I'm not sure if you're on a ketogenic diet, and that is going to very significantly limit your carb intake, even of healthy carbs. And that's kind of beyond the scope of our call here today.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, just a reminder that I'm recording all of the questions, and so as Paula and I review, we'll go back and see if we can give a little deeper dive to some of these bigger questions. Lauren asks, "What about fermented foods? Should you eat them, and how often, if yes?" And she's also asking a completely separate question about fasting and intermittent fasting.
Okay, big topics.
Yeah.
So fermented foods, they're great, and they are foods that are full of those live, active, good bugs, like yogurt. So they're full of those good probiotics for our system, and they are wonderful and healthy to eat. So I would say, unless your particular situation dictates otherwise, that's a food that you're welcome to enjoy. About fasting and intermittent fasting, gosh, I could do an entire talk on that. And that is something we've discussed as a topic for the future. So I'm not sure that I can really give that question justice in a few minutes of conversation.
Right.
It's just a really big topic, and it varies person to person what their situation is, and what they should be doing is something that really the person has to be known, their constitution, their place in where they are in their health. All of that has to be known, whether those things are applicable to them and whether they're healthy or good for them. So intermittent fasting is basically extending the time where we don't eat. All of us, most of us, I would say, are fasting right overnight. We go to sleep and we don't eat, and then we don't eat until we get up and have breakfast. So there's a school of thought that believes in limiting the amount of time that our bodies are digesting food. And it gives our time, our GI system, our brain, the rest of our bodies time to do the like cleanup work that happens when all's quiet and there's not food coming in. So it can be very beneficial for people, but whether it's the right thing for you, you'd have to kind of seek individual answers for that.
Right. So, and let me take a turn here from the layman's perspective too, Lauren. Here's how I answer that question. The answer is always going to be depends. It depends on the goal. So if somebody who was sitting on the call was asking about fasting and intermittent fasting for fat loss, again, probably a overview of intermittent fasting and what is it and how long should you do it, but understanding the end goal was to lose body fat. We're on a call today talking about keeping a non-cancer friendly environment. And so that conversation has to shift. So I'm just trying to explain to you why that's such a large topic to ask the question. Question is always going to be, why are you asking it? What is the end goal? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And to Paula's point, there is significant research and information about using fasting and intermittent fasting, for that matter, to create an environment that is less cancer friendly. So again, now that you brought it up, again, that's another reason why we record the questions, is for future topics. So noted, and absolutely fascinating. So thank you for the question. One other part for Lauren. It's not just that dairy. For those of you who are also listening and curious about fermented foods, it would be things like kimchi. It would be things like kombucha, some like fermented, the kimchi is like a fermented sauerkraut and whatnot. So look into that. Go ahead and Google that fermented foods, but just make sure that the origin of where you are finding those are similar to the last talk, which is organic and really good sourced fermented food. So really good one.
And it's
I would love to
make your own.
Yes, I was just going to say I would love to do one on how to make your own kombucha, which would be, we'd probably skeeve you all out, but really fun and fascinating. So a couple more questions and then we'll end for today. Anna asked, what is your opinion on, and I have never known how to pronounce the word, so have at it, Paula.
Erythritol is a sugar alcohol.
Everybody say it at the same time. Say it again. Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead.
We're going to tackle sugar and sugar substitutes in depth next time, but a sugar alcohol, the good news about a sugar alcohol is it's not going to raise your blood sugar. So it's non-glycemic. So that's the benefit. The bad thing is the reason it doesn't raise your blood sugar is it's not digested or broken down. It can give some people GI upset because of that reason, because it's on its way through your GI system for the ride, and on the way through it can create some, GI disturbance. So volume that you're eating can matter with certain people, and some people just don't care for it for that reason. But it's technically a safe thing to eat if you're concerned about blood sugar. And we'll dive into a lot more about healthy sugar substitutes next time.
Excellent. Excellent. I think I can take the next one if you're okay with it, about frozen vegetables, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. So Susie asks, is it a good idea to eat frozen vegetables a lot? So I like to look at vegetables in a spectrum, right? So first and foremost, we're going to travel back, making sure that our thin-skinned, in particular, the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, are taken care of. We want to make sure that our sourcing is good, right? And so fresh and local is always going to be top of list and top of mind for me. But for some of us, and locationally speaking, that's not always a choice. So flash frozen would be my next solid choice. And I'm assuming I'm doing a good job because Paula's shaking her head, so I feel like a good student. But making sure that those flash frozen vegetables, say that 3 times, are from an organic and a really good source, right? And then the third, my least favorite version, is going to be canned. And canned is because, of course, we're adding things in order to keep them preserved over time. So I hope that answers your question. The word a lot came after that question. Is it a good idea to eat frozen vegetables a lot? Here's my mantra. It's always a good idea to eat vegetables a lot. So whether or not you're getting them from fresh or frozen, hopefully not canned. And if you do choose can, you're rinsing them really well. Remember, we're going after a non-cancer friendly environment. And if we can bump that fiber up, that's really doing the body good. Did I get it right, Paula?
Absolutely. A plus. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. See,
that's
so you
great.
guys should be able to talk and be able to get that A plus too. It's 12:47. And so we are going to wrap it up with just a few pieces of housekeeping. One more question from Patty. I got to answer it. Is flash frozen different from just frozen? Paula, you want to take that one?
I thought you would take it because you brought it up.
Okay. Flash frozen means that it was immediately gone from crop to that freezing process. We don't want aged vegetables then frozen. You follow? So if it's at that peak version, right? We've let that vegetable or that fruit age. Again, too much with the glycemic index, but right off the vine or right off, into the freezer is what flash frozen means. And so for me, yes, the answer. And if those people who are lucky enough to live around a Wegmans, they have an excellent variety of flash frozen options. Okay. It says it on there. It says flash frozen. Yep. It says it right there on the packaging. So real quick, I want to say thank you to Paula as always. And thank you to you all for sitting in on our call. You did not miss anything if you came in late or you had to go early. This will be on our website, which is believebig.org. You can ask me any questions at Stacy, Stacy, no E, at believebig.org. In addition to that, don't forget to look on this session because there's quite a few handouts that will support you, that'll make it easier on you to do a little bit of detective work as you start unwrapping your own nutrition plan. We look forward to, don't forget, Carbs Part 2, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all about sugar the next time around. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks again, Paula. It was awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us.
All right. You guys take care.
All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.